The hidden legacy. Captain Natasha Volkov wiped condensation from her helmet visor and squinted at the crumbling research station. Titan's methane atmosphere swirled around her, creating an eerie amber haze. The abandoned outpost, last occupied 30 years ago, stood like a forgotten sentinel on the desolate moon's surface. Readings show minimal power signatures, her comms officer, Lieutenant Tenzin Dorje, reported from their orbiting ship, the Artemis. But there's definitely something still active in there, Captain. Copy that, Natasha responded, her breath fogging her helmet. She gestured to the three figures beside her. Kaido, take point on any text we find. Marcus, assess the tech. Darius, secure our exit. Her team nodded, their faces serious behind their visors. The station's airlock wheezed open reluctantly, revealing darkness within. Natasha's headlamp cut through the gloom, illuminating frost-covered corridors and abandoned workstations. The place felt like a tomb. Dr. Kaito Nakamura, the expedition's xenolinguist, moved cautiously down the main hallway, his scanner sweeping for any sign of documentation or data storage. This was a classified Omega-9 facility, he murmured. They were studying something important enough to hide at the edge of our solar system. Whatever it was, they left in a hurry, observed Darius Ockhaffer, their security specialist, indicating scattered personal items and half-emptied lockers. Marcus Chen, the team's engineer, paused at a sealed inner door. Power's still flowing to the security system here. His fingers moved rapidly over the ancient keypad. Someone wanted whatever's behind this door to stay powered even after they abandoned the place. The team exchanged glances. This was exactly what they'd been hoping for, something valuable enough to justify their unsanctioned expedition to Saturn's largest moon. "Can you get us in?" Natasha asked. Marcus grinned, his fingers already working the panel's circuits. "Is Enceladus icy?" 10 minutes later, the reinforced door slid open with a reluctant groan. Beyond lay a laboratory unlike the rest of the station, pristine, as if sealed in time. In the center stood a cylindrical object approximately 2 meters tall, composed of a material that seemed to shift subtly as they watched it, never quite settling on a definite color or texture. "Impossible," Kaido whispered, approaching the object with reverence. "This isn't human technology." "Agreed," Marcus said, his scanner displaying incomprehensible readings. "The power signature is, well, I've never seen anything like it." Natasha approached carefully. Around the base of the cylinder, embedded in the floor, was a ring of symbols unlike any language she'd encountered in 15 years of space exploration. "Kaido," she called, "what do you make of this?" The xenolinguist knelt, his eyes widening behind his visor. "It's not in any known catalog." His fingers hovered above the inscriptions. "But there's something familiar about the structural patterns, like they're meant to be understood by anyone with sufficient mathematical knowledge." Darius maintained his position by the door, weapon ready. "Captain, we need to consider extraction. If this is what I think it is, we're sitting on the kind of discovery that starts wars." Natasha knew he was right. The Imperial Federation that governed Earth and its colonies had strict protocols about alien artifacts. All were to be immediately reported and surrendered to the Bureau of Xenotechnological Research. Failure to comply was treason, punishable by death. But the Federation's increasingly oppressive rule had driven Natasha and her crew to the fringes of society. The Artemis operated in the gray areas of Imperial law, taking contracts from research institutions and private interests who sought knowledge the Federation restricted. "Marcus, can you download the station's records? I want to know what they discovered about this thing." "Already on it," he replied, connecting his device to the lab's main console. "Looks like they were studying it for years before the shutdown order came." His expression grew serious as he scanned the files. "Captain, you need to see this." The data revealed the artifact had been discovered not on Titan, but on a distant exoplanet designated HD 219,134. The research team had been attempting to decipher what they believed were coordinates encoded in the cylinder's emissions. "They thought it was a map," Kaido said, reading over Marcus's shoulder. a pointer to something bigger. Marcus nodded, and just before the Federation ordered the station abandoned, they cracked part of the code. He projected a star chart from his device. These coordinates point to a system at the edge of the Sagittarius Arm, about 80 light-years from here. Natasha studied the projection, her mind racing. A discovery of this magnitude could change everything, not just for her crew, but potentially for humanity's understanding of the universe. "Lieutenant Dorge," she called over the comms, "prep the Artemis for departure and set course for the following coordinates." "Captain," Darius interjected, "this is beyond risky, the Federation." "Won't know where we've gone," Natasha finished. "And by the time they figure it out, we'll have something valuable enough to negotiate with." She turned to Marcus. "Can we move the artifact?" The engineer frowned. "Not safely with our current equipment, but I can replicate the emissions data and the symbols. Whatever it's pointing to, we should be able to find it." Kaido was already documenting the inscriptions, his academic excitement evident despite the danger. "Captain, if this leads to a genuine alien civilization or their technology, it would be the most significant discovery in human history." 3 weeks later, the Artemis dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of a binary star system. The coordinates had led them to an unremarkable planet orbiting a red dwarf star, a rocky world with a thin atmosphere of nitrogen and carbon dioxide. "Scans show no artificial structures on the surface," reported Tenzin from the bridge. Natasha frowned. Had they misinterpreted the data or traveled all this way for nothing? "Wait," Marcus called, studying his instruments. "I'm detecting an energy signature similar to the cylinder, but magnitudes stronger. It's coming from beneath the surface, approximately 3 kilometers down at these coordinates." The landing party assembled quickly. Natasha, Kaido, Marcus, and Darius, along with 2 additional crew members. Dr. Olivia Hammond, their exobiologist, and technician Zuri Quaim, a minerals specialist. They sat down on a plateau overlooking a vast, rust-colored plain. The landscape was desolate, eroded by eons of harsh winds. Nothing about it suggested advanced technology or civilization. "The signal's coming from beneath that ridge," Marcus said, pointing to a formation about half a kilometer away. As they approached, Kaido's scanner began registering unusual patterns. "There's something here," a harmonic resonance in the rock itself. Zuri knelt to examine the ground. "This isn't natural." She ran her fingers over seemingly ordinary stone. "The mineral structure has been altered at the molecular level." Olivia's biosensors were equally confused. "I'm reading organic compounds integrated with the inorganic material. It's as if the entire ridge is one massive, complex organism, or machine, or both." Marcus approached a section of the ridge that appeared slightly different, smoother, with faint patterns etched into its surface. These match some of the symbols from the cylinder. Kaido joined him, excitement evident in his movements. "It's a key," he realized. The cylinder wasn't just a map, it was instruction for activation. Using the data they'd gathered from Titan, Kaido and Marcus began tracing specific patterns on the rock face. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled. The ridge began to transform, sections sliding away with impossible fluidity, revealing a descending pathway that hadn't existed moments before. Light emanated from the walls, not artificial illumination, but a bioluminescent glow that pulsed in rhythmic patterns. "Defensive positions," Natasha ordered, though her voice held wonder rather than fear. They had found something extraordinary, something beyond human understanding. The passage led them deep underground to a vast chamber that defied conventional architecture. The space seemed to bend and shift, as if parts of it existed in dimensions beyond the 3 they could perceive. At the center stood a towering construct of the same indeterminate material as the cylinder, but vastly larger and more complex. "It's beautiful," breathed Olivia, as the structure responded to their presence with cascading waves of color and motion. "And far beyond our technology," added Marcus, his instruments struggling to make sense of the readings. The energy patterns suggest it's operating simultaneously in multiple dimensional states. Kaido approached a console-like formation, his xenolinguistic training guiding his interpretation of the symbols that appeared. I think this is a repository of some kind, a library or database left by whoever built this place. Can you access it? Natasha asked. I can try to initiate basic communication protocols based on the mathematical patterns. As Kaido worked, Darius maintained vigilance, though his expression suggested even he was awestruck by their discovery. Captain, if the Federation learns about this, they'll weaponize it, Natasha finished, which is why we need to understand it first. After hours of careful work, Kaido managed to establish rudimentary interaction with the system. The chamber responded with a holographic projection, but unlike any hologram they'd seen, it existed with physical presence, in dimensions that seemed to fold into and through each other. It's showing us how they perceived reality, Marcus whispered. Not three-dimensional space, but at least 7 interlinked dimensional planes. The projection resolved into a representation of beings, entities that existed as patterns of energy and matter intertwined across multiple planes of existence. They had created the technology not as weapons, but as tools to maintain the health of spacetime itself. They were caretakers, Kaido translated from the flowing symbols. They called themselves, he struggled with the concept, something like resonant ones or harmony keepers. Why did they leave this here? Olivia wondered. The answer came as the projection shifted to show cataclysmic events, tears in the fabric of spacetime, caused by a species whose expansion and technology threatened the stability of the galaxy. The Resonant Ones had created these installations as safeguards, to be discovered by species who might face similar crises. They left it for us, Natasha realized, or whoever was ready to find it. As they absorbed this revelation, a subtle vibration passed through the chamber. Marcus checked his scanner, face paling. Captain, we've got incoming ships, Federation signatures, heavy cruiser class. How we covered our trail, Darius said, immediately moving to defensive position. Doesn't matter now, Natasha replied. Tenzin status report. The lieutenant's voice came through with static interference. 3 Imperial vessels just dropped out of hyperspace. They're hailing us with surrender protocols and deploying ground forces. ETA to your position, 12 minutes. The team exchanged grim looks. The Federation must have been monitoring the Titan station or tracking the cylinder's emissions pattern. Either way, they were trapped. We need to get this data off planet, Natasha decided. Marcus, copy everything you can. Kaido, keep working on the translation. The rest of you prepare for extraction. But Marcus was staring at the central construct, which had begun pulsing with increasing intensity. Captain, I think it's... Responding to the threat. The energy patterns are shifting. The holographic projection reformed, displaying what appeared to be operational instructions. Kaido studied them intently. It's showing us how to activate some kind of defensive system, or, no, not defensive, transport. A weapon, Darius asked. No, replied Kaido, more like a doorway. With the Federation forces closing in, they had minutes to decide. Trust alien technology they barely understood or face certain imprisonment, or worse. Show me how it works, Natasha ordered. Kaido and Marcus quickly deciphered the activation sequence. As they input the final command, the chamber's walls began to shimmer with cascading energy. Tenzin, Natasha called over comms, get the Artemis out of the system. Rendezvous at emergency point Echo. Captain, we're not leaving without. That's an order, Lieutenant. We'll find another way out. As the Federation troops breached the surface entrance, the chamber's transformation accelerated. The space around them seemed to fold, reality itself bending as 7-dimensional technology activated fully for the first time in millennia. Admiral Valerian Drayson, leading the Federation incursion team, arrived just in time to see the chamber empty of human presence, not by conventional escape, but by something his science officer described as a localized collapse of conventional spacetime. Drayson stared at the alien construct which had returned to its dormant state. "Find me answers," he demanded of his shaken research team. "Where did they go and how do we follow them?" Light years away, in a location that existed partially between conventional dimensional planes, Natasha Volkov and her team materialized in another chamber similar to the first. But this one showed signs of recent activity, and they were not alone. A figure stepped forward, humanoid but clearly not human. Its form shifted subtly, adapting to their perceptual limitations. "We have awaited those who would rediscover the harmony," it said in perfect, unaccented standard. "Your enemies have found one key, but you have found understanding. The resonance awakens." Natasha steadied herself, realizing that their discovery had just become far more significant than they could have imagined. The game had changed. Humanity was not alone, and the technology they'd found was merely the beginning. "Who are you?" she asked. "We are the Guardians," the being replied, "and you have arrived just as the old prophecies foretold, at the moment when the dimensions themselves are threatened with collapse. Convergence." Admiral Julian Dravis stood motionless before the viewport of the Imperial dreadnought Imperator, his angular face illuminated by the distant stars. His reputation within the Federation was built on ruthless efficiency, a man who solved problems permanently. "4 weeks," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. 4 weeks since Captain Volkov and her crew disappeared with technology that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Commander Eliza Novick shifted uncomfortably beside him. "The research team is making progress with the artifact site, Admiral. We've managed to decipher some of." "Some is insufficient, Commander." Dravis turned, his cybernetic eye glowing faintly red against his dark skin. "The Empress herself has tasked me with retrieving this technology. The breakaway colonies are gaining strength. The resistance movement grows bolder each day. We need absolute dominance, not partial understanding." "Yes, Admiral," Novick replied stiffly. "Double the research team. Conscript more xenotechs if necessary. I want results in 72 hours. Dravis turned back to the stars. "And dispatch our agents to every known associate of Volkov's crew. Someone somewhere knows where they've gone." In a secret facility concealed beneath the icy surface of Europa, Captain Natasha Volkov studied the holographic display with intense concentration. The 7th-Dimensional models floating before her represented concepts that had no words in human language. "It's like trying to teach quantum mechanics to someone who's never seen electricity," she muttered. Beside her, Dr. Kaito Nakamura nodded in understanding. "The Guardians are patient, at least. They've waited thousands of years for someone to find them. A few more weeks won't matter." "Won't it?" Natasha gestured to another display showing Federation fleet movements. "Dravis is hunting us across 3 sectors. The Federation is increasing patrols near every Nexus outpost. We may not have weeks." The facility trembled slightly as another transport arrived through the dimensional gateway, technology gifted by the Guardians that allowed instantaneous travel between their hidden outposts. The Europa base, once an abandoned mining operation, now served as the central hub for what was quickly becoming a resistance movement, unlike any the Federation had faced. Marcus Chen entered the chamber, accompanied by Commander Alara Voss, the leader of Nexus. Once an Imperial Admiral herself, Voss had defected 5 years earlier when the Federation had massacred colonists on Proxima Centauri B for refusing increased resource quotas. "The prototype is ready for testing," Marcus announced, his normally cheerful demeanor subdued by exhaustion. "We've incorporated the 7-dimensional principles into a field generator. If it works, we should be able to create localized areas where conventional physics bend." Alara's scarred face remained impassive. "And if it doesn't work?" "Then we'll have a very colorful explosion," Marcus replied with a forced smile. The testing chamber was a reinforced cavern deep beneath Europa's surface. The prototype, a fusion of human engineering and Guardian technology, sat on a platform in the center, surrounded by various sensor arrays. "Everyone behind the barrier," Natasha ordered as Marcus made final adjustments. The small team, Natasha, Kaido, Marcus, Darius, and Alara, moved behind the protective shield. Other members of their growing alliance watched from a shielded observation deck above. Zuri Quaim, whose expertise in exotic materials had proven invaluable. Olivia Hammond, who had formed an unprecedented understanding with the Guardian's biological systems. And Vex, a Guardian liaison whose true form was imperceptible to human senses, and who therefore projected a humanoid appearance. Initiating sequence, Marcus announced, activating the device remotely. The prototype hummed to life, emitting a soft violet glow that seemed to warp the very air around it. Instruments registered impossible readings as space itself began to fold within the containment field. "It's working," whispered Kaido, watching the dimensional analyzers. "We're seeing into the 5th-dimensional plane." On the platform, small objects, tools deliberately left as test subjects, began to exhibit impossible behaviors. A wrench passed through a solid metal plate without damaging either object. A glass cube aged centuries in seconds, then reverted to its original state. "Can we weaponize this?" Alara asked, ever the tactician. "That's not the point," Vex responded, voice resonating strangely through the human vocal construct it employed. "The technology wasn't created for warfare. It was designed to heal damaged spacetime and prevent dimensional collapse." "But it could be used defensively," Natasha interjected, mediating between the military pragmatism of Nexus and the Guardian's more cosmic perspective. "If we can create localized fields where Federation weapons don't function as expected." The test concluded successfully, though Marcus noted several modifications would be needed before field deployment. As the team dispersed to their various tasks, Darius pulled Natasha aside. "We've got another problem," he said quietly. "Our Nexus contact on Mars just went dark, and before communication cut, they reported increased security around all major Federation research facilities." Natasha's expression darkened. "They're accelerating their own research on the artifact site." "Worse," Darius continued. "According to our intelligence, Admiral Dravis has been given command of the operation, and you know his reputation." The name sent a chill through Natasha. Julian Dravis was notorious throughout human space, a brilliant tactician with no ethical boundaries. His counterinsurgency operations had crushed a dozen rebellions through methods so brutal they were classified at the highest levels. "We need to move faster," she decided. "Get word to all our cells, accelerate timetables, increase security protocols, and I want our eyes on every Federation communication channel." 3 days later, the leadership council of what was now being called the Resonance Alliance gathered to discuss a disturbing development. Intelligence had confirmed that Federation scientists had partially activated the original artifact site, destabilizing the dimensional barriers around it. "They don't understand what they're doing," Vex explained, its projected form flickering with agitation. "They see the technology as a weapon, a means to access other dimensions for military advantage, but they're damaging the very fabric of spacetime." Holograms displayed sensor readings from the site, showing fracture patterns spreading through dimensional planes invisible to conventional human perception. "If these fractures continue to grow," Kaido translated from the complex Guardian data, "they could create cascading failures across multiple star systems. Planets could become uninhabitable. Stars could age prematurely and die." "What's the timeline?" Alara asked sharply. "Difficult to predict precisely," Vex responded. "But once the critical threshold is passed, perhaps 3 to 4 weeks at current degradation rates, the process becomes irreversible." The implications hung heavily in the air. What had begun as a discovery of ancient technology now had galaxy-wide consequences. "We need to secure that site," Natasha decided. "Not just to prevent the Federation from weaponizing it, but to repair the damage they're causing." "A direct assault would be suicide," Darius objected. "They've fortified the entire planet. Dravis has at least 3 capital ships in orbit." Marcus, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "What about the convergence point?" All eyes turned to him. The Guardian archives mentioned it. he continued. A location where all the dimensional outposts connect, where the barriers between dimensions are naturally thinner. Vex confirmed it's accessible from any outpost. And its significance, Ilara prompted. From there, we could potentially access and repair all damaged sites simultaneously, Marcus explained, including the one the Federation is tampering with. Vex's projected form seemed to intensify. The convergence point is not a technique to be used lightly. It was created as a measure of last resort, when dimensional integrity was threatened across multiple systems. Which is exactly what we're facing, Natasha pointed out. The plan that emerged was daring to the point of recklessness. While the main team would travel to the convergence point through the dimensional gateway, a smaller strike team would infiltrate the Federation research site to place stabilization devices that would connect it to the convergence network. It's not just about stopping the Federation anymore, Natasha reminded them as preparations began. It's about preventing a catastrophe that could affect countless worlds. The week that followed was a blur of activity. Marcus and his engineering team constructed stabilization devices based on Guardian designs. Kaito and Olivia worked with Vex to understand the protocols for the convergence point, and Darius trained infiltration teams comprised of both human resistance fighters and the few Guardians physically capable of operating in conventional space. All while Federation forces, led by the relentless Admiral Dravis, tightened their search for the Resonance Alliance. The operation began with a calculated risk. Nexus forces launched visible attacks on Federation outposts in the Procyon system, drawing attention and resources away from both the original artifact site and Europa. Meanwhile, Darius led his infiltration team toward the heavily guarded planet where it all began. "Approaching insertion point," reported Zuri, who piloted their stealth craft, a vessel enhanced with Guardian technology that partially existed in higher dimensions, making it nearly invisible to conventional sensors. The team, Darius, Zuri, Olivia, and 2 Guardian operatives who had taken humanoid form, prepared for orbital drop. Their mission: place 5 stabilization devices at precise locations around the Federation research facility, then extract before the devices activated. "Remember," Darius reminded them, "we have a 90-minute window. After that, Natasha activates the convergence sequence whether we're clear or not." The drop was textbook, silent, undetected, under cover of a magnetic storm. But as they approached the facility perimeter, they discovered the Federation defenses had been significantly upgraded. "Dimensional dampening fields," one of the Guardian operatives observed. "They've already learned enough to counter some of our advantages." Olivia scanned the barrier. "We can still pass through, but our higher dimensional capabilities will be suppressed inside. We'll be limited to conventional tactics." Darius nodded grimly. "Then we do this the old-fashioned way." Meanwhile, aboard the Artemis, now modified with Guardian technology, Natasha's team prepared to travel to the convergence point. The ship hummed with energy as Marcus made final adjustments to the navigation system. "The coordinates are unlike anything I've ever worked with," he explained. "It's not just a location in space, it's a nexus point across multiple dimensional planes." The journey would be dangerous. Even with Guardian guidance, moving between dimensions risked molecular destabilization for humans. They had developed protective measures, but they were largely theoretical. "Everyone ready?" Natasha asked, looking around the bridge at her crew, Marcus, Kaito, Lieutenant Dorge, and 3 Guardian technicians. Ilara had remained at Europa to coordinate the Resistance fleet in case of Federation discovery. "As will ever be," Marcus replied with forced cheerfulness. The Artemis engaged its dimensional drive, a modification that caused the ship to phase partially out of conventional spacetime. The sensation was disorienting. Crew members reported seeing multiple versions of each other, echoing movements seconds before or after they occurred. "Dimensional barrier approaching," reported Tenzin from the navigation console. "Transition in 3, 2, 1. Reality itself seemed to shatter around them. The viewports showed impossible geometries, structures that folded in on themselves, stars that existed as both points and planes simultaneously. The human mind wasn't designed to process seven-dimensional space, and several crew members had to close their eyes against the vertigo. "Dimensional stabilizers holding," Marcus called over the ship's groaning protests. "Hull integrity at 92% and falling. We need to complete transition quickly." "Maximum power to the drive," Natasha ordered. "Push us through." With a final surge, the Artemis broke through the dimensional barrier into a space unlike anything they had imagined. The convergence point existed as a vast spherical structure that seemed to be made of pure energy, pulsing, flowing currents of light that formed intricate patterns across its surface. "It's beautiful," breathed Kaito, the scientist in him momentarily overwhelmed by awe. "And ancient," added one of the Guardian technicians. "This has existed since before your sun was formed." The Artemis approached the structure cautiously. According to Vex's instructions, they needed to dock at a specific node, a point where human physiology could safely interface with the convergent systems. Back at the Federation research facility, Darius's team had successfully breached the perimeter but encountered heavy resistance. Federation guards armed with prototype phase weapons, clearly reverse-engineered from Guardian technology, had pinned them down in a maintenance corridor. "We're running out of time," Zuri warned, checking her chronometer. 38 minutes until the convergence activates." "We need a diversion," Darius decided. He turned to the Guardian operatives. "Can you still manipulate local time perception, even with the dampening field?" The Guardians exchanged looks. "Briefly, it will drain our energy reserves quickly." "That's all we need." The plan worked, barely. While the Guardians created a localized time distortion that confused the Federation guards, the human team members planted the stabilization devices. But the effort left the Guardians severely weakened, and Federation reinforcements were closing in. "Final device placed," Olivia reported, "initiating remote activation sequence." The devices hummed to life, creating a pentagonal pattern of energy that began to resonate with the artifact at the center of the facility. Alarms blared as Federation systems detected the unauthorized activation. "Time to go," Darius ordered, supporting one of the weakened Guardians. They had almost reached their extraction point when a commanding voice stopped them cold. "Impressive work, truly." Admiral Julian Dravis stepped from the shadows, flanked by elite Federation guards with weapons trained on the team. His cybernetic eye glowed as it analyzed them, but ultimately futile. Darius shifted slightly, positioning himself between Dravis and the others. "The devices are already active, Admiral. You can't stop what's coming." Dravis smiled thinly. "Perhaps not, but I can ensure you don't live to see it." He raised his hand to order the guards to fire. At that precise moment, throughout the facility, reality seemed to flicker. The stabilization devices had reached full power, connecting the site to the convergence network. At the convergence point, Natasha and her team had successfully docked with the ancient structure. Following Vex's instructions, they had interfaced their systems with the convergence controls, a process that required both technological skill and a form of mental synchronization that left them mentally exhausted. "All stabilization points are now active," reported Kaito, monitoring the network, "including—" His voice rose in excitement. "The Federation site. Darius's team succeeded." "Can you get a status report on their team?" Natasha asked urgently. Marcus shook his head. "The dimensional interface is consuming all processing power. We're blind to conventional communications until the sequence completes." Natasha felt a stab of worry for her friends, but pushed it aside. The mission had to come first. "Initiating convergence sequence," she ordered. The structure around them pulsed with increasing intensity. Through the viewports, they could see the energy patterns shifting, forming new configurations as the ancient system activated fully for the first time in millennia. "The dimensional fractures are beginning to stabilize," one of the Guardian technicians reported. "The convergence is working." But something was wrong. Warning signals flashed across their consoles as unexpected energy patterns emerged. The Federation, Marcus realized with horror. They're trying to force the artifact to remain active even during stabilization. They're fighting the convergence process. At the Federation facility, Dravis watched with clinical interest as reality itself seemed to warp around them. The stabilization devices were creating a field that interfaced with something beyond his perception, something his scientists hadn't predicted. Fascinating, he murmured, even as his guards nervously backed away from the increasingly unstable energy patterns. Record everything. Darius and his team used the distraction to make their move, diving for cover as the dimensional distortions intensified. The entire facility shook as two opposing forces, the convergence trying to heal the dimensional fractures and the Federation technology trying to exploit them, created a dangerous resonance pattern. The place is going to tear itself apart, Zuri shouted over the cacophony of alarms and structural failures. Dravis, recognizing the imminent danger, barked orders to his personnel to evacuate, but maintained his position, unwilling to abandon the technology that could secure Federation dominance. Back at the convergence point, the situation was growing desperate. The opposing energies had created a feedback loop that threatened to destabilize the entire network. If this continues, the dimensional barriers will collapse completely, warned a Guardian technician. Countless worlds will be affected. Options, Natasha demanded. Marcus studied the systems frantically. We need to increase power to the convergence, override whatever the Federation is doing. That would require more energy than we can generate, Kaito objected. Unless, Marcus looked up, his face pale with realization. The Artemis, her power core, if we feed it directly into the convergence system. It would destroy the ship, Tenzin said quietly. A moment of heavy silence fell over the bridge. The Artemis had been their home, their sanctuary, but now it might be the only thing that could save untold lives across the galaxy. Do it, Natasha ordered, her voice firm despite the emotion behind it. As Marcus began the power transfer sequence, Natasha opened a channel to all resistance forces. This is Captain Volkov. The convergence is active but facing interference. We're taking measures to ensure success, but all teams should prepare for possible dimensional instability. Protect your people. At the Federation facility, the power struggle had reached critical levels. Equipment exploded as energy surged through systems never designed to handle such forces. Darius and his team had nearly reached their extraction point when a massive structural collapse cut off their path. Secondary route, Darius ordered, redirecting the team down another corridor. They rounded a corner to find Admiral Dravis, now alone, standing before the main artifact. The Federation guards had fled, but Dravis remained, his cybernetic implants interfacing directly with the alien technology. You don't understand what you're doing, Olivia called to him. You're endangering everyone, not just us, not just the Federation. Entire star systems could be affected. Dravis turned, his expression eerily calm despite the chaos around him. Progress requires sacrifice, Dr. Hammond. The Federation will emerge stronger for this knowledge. There won't be a Federation if dimensional collapse occurs, Darius countered, edging closer. You need to shut down your interface. For a moment it seemed Dravis might listen. Then his cybernetic eye flashed with new data. My scientists report a massive energy surge coming through the network. Your people are attempting something desperate. He smiled coldly. Too late. At the convergence point, the Artemis shuddered as its power core channeled energy directly into the ancient structure. Systems failed across the ship as it sacrificed itself to strengthen the convergence. Core temperature critical, reported Tenzin, fighting to keep his station operational. 2 minutes to catastrophic failure. Everyone to emergency positions, Natasha ordered. Prepare for rapid evacuation to the convergence structure. As the crew secured vital equipment and prepared to abandon ship, the view screens showed a remarkable transformation. The dimensional fractures visible in higher dimensional space were beginning to close as the convergence overwhelmed the Federation interference. "It's working," breathed Kaido. "The barriers are stabilizing." At the Federation facility, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The artifact's energy patterns suddenly shifted, breaking Dravis's connection and sending him sprawling. The stabilization devices pulsed with renewed strength, creating a harmonious resonance that began to heal the damaged spacetime around the site. Dravis struggled to his feet, reaching for his weapon, but Darius was faster. A single shot from his phase pistol struck the Admiral's cybernetic systems, disabling them. "It's over, Julian," Darius said. "The convergence has won." The facility continued to collapse around them as dimensional stability returned, the process healing the cosmos but destroying the physical structure built to exploit it. Darius made a quick decision. "We're taking him with us," he told his team, securing the unconscious Admiral. "His knowledge is too valuable, and he needs to face justice for his crimes." They barely escaped as the facility imploded behind them, not in a conventional explosion, but in a dimensional folding that effectively removed it from conventional space, a side effect of the convergence process that none had anticipated. At the convergence point, the Artemis had reached critical status. As the crew evacuated to the safety of the ancient structure, Natasha remained on the bridge with Marcus, ensuring the power transfer maintained until the process completed. 30 seconds, Marcus warned, his console sparking around him. "You need to go, Captain." "Not without you," Natasha insisted, helping him disconnect the final systems. They made it to the airlock just as the ship's core reached critical mass. The explosion, when it came, was unlike anything they had witnessed. The Artemis didn't simply destroy itself, but seemed to transcend conventional matter, its energy perfectly integrated into the convergent structure. When it was over, when the dimensional barriers had been restored and the network stabilized, the survivors gathered in the central chamber of the convergent structure. Guardian technological ingenuity created temporary accommodations while they assessed their situation. "The Federation facility has been neutralized," reported Zuri via the now-functional communication network. "Admiral Dravis is in custody, and we've recovered significant data from their systems." "And the dimensional damage?" Natasha asked, looking to the Guardian technicians. "Repaired," one confirmed. "The convergence performed as designed. The galaxy is safe, at least from this particular threat." Kaido, who had been studying the convergence records, approached with an expression of wonder. "Captain, the archives here are vast, knowledge spanning millions of years and thousands of civilizations. The Guardians have been sharing technology with worthy species all this time, helping them advance without destroying themselves." "And now they've shared it with us," Marcus added. "Not because we're advanced, but because we proved we'd use it responsibly." The implications were profound. Humanity now had access to technology that operated on principles they were only beginning to understand. Technology that could either elevate them to unprecedented heights or, in the wrong hands, cause unimaginable destruction. 2 days later, as Nexus forces secured their position and began coordinating with other resistance cells across human space, Natasha stood with Alara Voss and Vex at a viewpoint, overlooking the magnificent structure of the convergence. "The Federation won't stop," Alara warned. "They've tasted the potential of this technology. They'll come with everything they have." "Let them come," Natasha replied. "We understand something they don't. This technology isn't about power or dominance. It's about harmony, about maintaining the delicate balance of existence itself." Vex's projected form shifted thoughtfully. "Your species stands at a crossroads, Captain Volkov. The knowledge you've gained here could lead to a new golden age or to your extinction. The choice of path is yours." Natasha watched as her team worked alongside the Guardians, humans and ancient beings collaborating with mutual respect and shared purpose. Already, they were learning to perceive dimensions beyond their conventional understanding, to see reality not as fixed and unchangeable, but as a fluid, interconnected whole. "We choose harmony," she said firmly. "We choose to be worthy of the trust you've placed in us." As if in response, The convergence pulsed with renewed energy, casting prismatic light across dimensions visible and invisible. A beacon of hope in a universe where humanity was just beginning to understand its place in a much larger, more complex existence than they had ever imagined. In the weeks that followed, the Resonance Alliance grew stronger. Federation worlds, hearing of the discoveries and witnessing demonstrations of 7th-Dimensional technology used for healing and prosperity rather than warfare, began to question their loyalty to an increasingly oppressive regime. Admiral Dravis, his cybernetic systems disabled and his ambitions thwarted, provided valuable intelligence about Federation plans and capabilities. His perspective gradually shifted as he observed firsthand the potential of collaboration with the Guardians, not conquest, but partnership. The war was far from over. The Federation still controlled vast resources and territories, but a fundamental change had occurred in the balance of power. Humanity had discovered it was not alone in the universe, and more importantly, had been deemed worthy of joining an ancient legacy of guardianship over the very fabric of reality itself. As Captain Natasha Volkov looked out at the stars from the newly constructed Guardian outpost on Europa, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From an abandoned research station on Titan to the heart of 7th-Dimensional technology and the birth of a movement that might reshape human civilization. "We thought we were primitive," she murmured to herself, echoing words she had heard Kaito speak in wonder, "until we discovered what we were always meant to become." The stars seemed to shine brighter in response, as if acknowledging that humanity had taken its first true steps into a larger universe, one where dimensions folded into each other like pages of a cosmic book, and where the echoes of forgotten civilizations guided the way forward into an unimaginable future.